Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today, while we wait for Marathon to come out, we're going to be looking at Hunt Showdown, an extraction shooter from a few years ago that has an ongoing fan base and continual updates. It has been very successful and was recommended by RHEBERT4. Sorry, I don't know how to say your name, but in the last video I did about Level 0 extraction for the While We Wait for Marathon series, he recommended Hunt Showdown, and so here we are. So the idea is I'm going to be looking at extraction shooters and playing through them to get a feel for what the genre is like, and then some takeaways that I'm hoping will give me insight into the genre in the lead up to when Marathon comes out, so we're more informed when the game gets here as to what we should be looking for. Just to be clear before we go on, I did play Hunt Showdown when it first came out, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, but I only ended up playing for a few hours, maybe 4 or 5 hours, and it just didn't hook me in at the time. So coming back now, I definitely have a different take on it. I feel like the aesthetic has grown on me. It's definitely a lot more visually appealing, and the dark, gritty southern stuff kind of seems more interesting visually this time around. Overall, I just want to say Hunt is a great game. It has a very solid FPS feel with very tight controls that never feel like they're too floaty or you're not hitting targets because of a design issue. The aesthetic is really cool despite my initial thoughts from when I played it. It has tons of modes and features that allow people to jump in and learn how to play, and then also give variants for people who've been playing for a long time. So you got the regular bounty hunt mode with you can go solo, teams of 2 or teams of 3, where you get in, you try to get a bounty by killing one of the monsters and then extract with your team. You also have a sole survivor mode where everyone's going in solo and trying to do the same thing, but no teammates and no teams playing against you. You also have the tutorial modes, which were very helpful in explaining the basic premise of finding clues, which will lead you to the bigger monsters, which you kill, and then collect their bounty, which you can extract with to gain more points that you can use to get upgrades. You also have the shooting range, and then my favorite, the trials, which I'll get into in a little bit. The lore is also very interesting, and it features a kind of encyclopedic book called the Monstrum that has additional details as you go and encounter these things. You can refer back to that encyclopedia and it'll give you additional information and context about the characters and the creatures you run into. And there is a very clear, kind of like what I was saying with the modes, very clear direction for players to go. You know, when you join, it definitely points you in, hey, this is the bounty hunt mode, this is the core aspect of the game. If you need additional items, jump over to these trials modes or do the tutorial, learn what you need to do. And then also for the first 10 levels, if you come in, you won't lose your characters upon death. So traditionally in an extraction shooter, it's kind of like a battle royale where the character that you have for this game is its own if you don't extract with any items. And thus by extracting, that's what enables you to enter the next match with more goods, gear, and items. And finally, before I touch on a few things that I want to see in Marathon and how I want to see them implemented, I just want to say, if you choose to play Hunt Showdown, which I recommend, it's a good game, be prepared to die. A lot of dying. It's normal not to extract. You know, a lot of the time you'll get into a gunfight and you might not even see the people who are shooting at you, and it takes a while to get the game sense and understanding to really look for the audio cues and position yourself in places where you're not, prone to being hit by somebody that you never saw coming. Especially after you've defeated the monster and you have to collect its soul essence or whatever to extract with that for the bounty. You're kind of basically just pinging every player nearby saying, hey, come here, these guys are trying to get the loot. And so everyone can kind of get a general sense through the dark vision of what your location is. So it creates this really intense moment where you have this hunting phase where you're kind of in the open and you have this potential to run into other players. And then if you do successfully kill the monster, it's now this tense situation of you're holding down this structure that was housing the monster and you're being attacked from all sides at any moment by the hunters who are coming in and trying to steal your loot. It is a very interesting feeling when you get far into this extraction mode in a match, and then all of a sudden you have this kind of Rainbow Six siege style moment where you're setting up, defenses inside a building and getting ready to hold out. And that kind of variance in the gameplay creates a really rewarding loop where you're prepping for this multi-stage event that keeps the matches fun and interesting and varied for every single single instance. So with that being said, let's hit on some of the things that I want to see transfer over to Marathon, that I'm hoping Bungie can look at games like Hunt and go, oh, okay, I see how we need to implement that. The first thing that I really loved was the Trials mode. So the Trials mode allows you to jump into the maps without any other players, only PvE kind of setting with monsters running around, and complete little short, maybe 5 to 10 minute challenges without having to deal with the PvP factor. Now, some of these are like sniper challenges, shooting a bunch of targets from a distance in a certain amount of time, or getting a certain number of headshots, killing a certain type of boss enemy, or maybe like a slightly larger enemy that takes more damage to defeat, or doing kind of like a platforming style race around the map to hit a certain number of checkpoints. These trials offer rewards that you can then take with you on your expeditions in the bounty hunt mode, so it actually benefits you to go and do them. It also allows you to gain a level of familiarity with the map that you really wouldn't be able to do if you were constantly scanning and nervous about trying to extract with all of your items. So it's kind of freedom to run around the map and then also do these trials where you get the experience killing the enemies that you might not encounter every match. Like, I remember doing the trials and coming across the, I think they're called the Inferis, and they're these flame-covered zombie-like ghouls that can sprint at you when you shoot them, and when you kill them they explode. And I didn't even realize that, I was playing a match prior to that where one of those things had blown me up. I'd taken a bunch of damage and it'd come from behind me and I didn't even know what it is. And so just by going through this trials mode, I was able to gain that understanding, so when I encountered those enemies later on, I effectively knew how to deal with them, or how to approach them, or how to avoid them. On top of the fact that it gives you such a greater level of game sense, it's also a fun, less stressful way to learn those things, as opposed to the high pressure situation of trying to survive when you actually have loot on you that you want to extract with. But I think that Marathon needs to implement something where you're able to get into the map and fight the environmental enemies and elements without worrying about the PvP aspect, so that you can gain that upper hand knowledge without having to do what would take maybe 1,000 PvP matches for you to get that same experience with those aspects of the game. It is a really, really great idea, and it's implemented super well. And in addition to that, they also, kind of along the lines of the Trials mode, offer a shooting range, which I would assume Marathon would have something like that. I mean, I feel like a lot of FPSs now have this kind of mode where you can jump in and get a feel for the, weapon spread and how each weapon is going to operate prior to, you have it on your person. But I also think that the shooting range is valuable. It's just, it wasn't as valuable from my understanding of the game as that Trials mode was. The next thing I would love to see in Marathon, which I kind of touched on, I believe, in my expectations video, is the monstrum, or the lore encyclopedia that I was talking about earlier. This thing is stacked. I had no idea that this existed in Hunt. I knew that there was generally kind of like a background to why this Louisiana deep south setting of the United States had become corrupted and there were zombies and stuff running around, but I didn't realize that it was written out so well and expressed so clearly. This lore manual is super cool. It is filled with interesting stuff, and the way that you even access it is super cool and gives you a reason to try to go out and find some of these, monsters that maybe you haven't encountered yet. I remember seeing like, I didn't have the Scrapbeak one unlocked, and I remember getting in a match and seeing that, Dragon Scrapbeak, I really want to get there and have this encounter and kill him so that I can unlock more of his encyclopedia entries, so I can read more about the lore of this monster. And if Marathon is able to implement that, it is, they basically already have an encyclopedia written for them, because there's such a wealth of knowledge just from the ARG and obviously the original trilogy. To be able to unlock that via in-game actions would be super rewarding. I could definitely see myself sitting through, one of those encyclopedias on Marathon and reading it all the way through front to back, just to make sure I have a good understanding of all the lore. If they are able to introduce some sort of terminal, maybe wherever the home base or the main menu is, that allows you access to reading about the AI that you're encountering, or other Traxxas, Sekaguchi, USC members you're encountering, or maybe you can pick up intel plans or, encountering certain droids and just like being able to read the history of how the stuff got there and what's been uncovered would be super satisfying, very rewarding, and it seems like they already have so much written out that this seems like such a no-brainer. We definitely need, honestly, exactly like the format they have here in Hunt Showdown, drop that in and just retrofit the pieces, because the feel of being able to click through that book and learn all this additional information is fantastic. All right, and the final thing I want to see in Marathon, okay, the hero shooter debacle is what I'll refer to this as, the roster system. So in Hunt, your characters are not, you don't like pick how they appear or what items they have. Instead, you recruit your characters from this roster system. So there's a certain number of these mercenaries or looters or hunters who want to go in and pull loot from this corrupted area with all these monsters. And so you go to this roster board and you hire them with a relatively small amount of the currency that you get from playing the game. Now, I know when the hero shooter line was written in that news article from a little bit ago, it was one of the major turnoffs for a lot of people, especially if you look in the Reddit and stuff and you see what people were saying. But the way that it felt here, it did not feel like I was limited in creatively expressing how I wanted to play my character. It felt a lot more like a feature that made sense in universe, that allowed me to kind of have new gameplay experiences where I would buy a character who might have an item that I wasn't regularly using, and now I'm kind of in a situation where I might want to implement that. I did not feel limited by it, and I think there were a lot of really cool options. Even the base characters came with some really cool stuff and had a cool look to them as well. I could imagine that the way that they could implement this into Marathon while retaining some of the more creative desires that people had originally wanted, given the modularity of what the runners looked like in the original trailer, is by creating a kind of black market where they're selling these clone series, and by extracting with some currency, you would go to this kind of market or black market and buy these clones. But I would imagine that the clones are going to come with certain upgrades or equipment already, or at least slots to put the equipment into. This would make sense from the universe perspective of, greedy corporations are trying to buy and sell and profit off this conflict that's happening at this colony, and also work from a gameplay perspective of how do you make losing your character or failing to extract actually mean something to the player. Well, if you're physically losing that clone that you had to purchase, I can't think of a better way to express that sentiment inside of the game. And realistically, if that's what's considered the hero shooter concept and they kind of pull this directly out of Hunt, I think that it would fit. I mean, if each character had the level of variance that's afforded by Hunt just by changing out the weapons and equipment that you're using, then I think that it would make sense and would feel really cool. So definitely one of my takeaways is after playing Hunt, I'm not as worried about that comment, especially if it's implemented in a way like this. I think it could be cool. It would allow them to offer different variations and update it as the game's going on to continue to add like cool characters and mechanics that we can play with. Overall, Hunt just feels like a great template for how Marathon could implement a sustainable extraction shooter format. And I'm definitely glad that I checked it out a little bit later on and have seen all the stuff they've done to improve it. It's a fun experience. So just at the end, I want to touch on a few things that I wish I saw. The first thing is a deathmatch style mode, just to practice engagements with moving targets and not be so nervous when I see another hunter and then I'm missing all of my shots. I think that a more quick-paced, lower time to kill mode where you're just in a smaller section of the map and I can get a few more repetitions of shooting at the players and peeking the corners, I probably would be able to advance my skill and have more satisfying engagements in the main mode if I had access to a deathmatch mode like that. I would even say that I think that mode could be successful even without kind of like a sustainable reward that comes from it. That might be wrong, as I could see why some players wouldn't want to jump into a mode that's not going to offer them a level or equipment or gear or currency or something, but I honestly feel like if that was available in Hunt just for practice to get more rounds where I'm shooting at people and being shot at and making plays and finding out what the best angles are. I think just for the experience, I would spend quite a bit of time in there just to get the feel of those kills and the drop of the rounds and everything without having to worry about dying deep into a match. The other thing that I want to see is daily challenges or smaller goals that are updated more frequently. Now, this could be my misunderstanding of the game, and I could be missing something entirely here, but my understanding from goals that you have to accomplish is there's week-long challenges, and there's also something called quests, which for me say they're coming soon. I don't know if that is because I'm like a low level or something, or if that's just how it is for everybody. I think I got to rank 26 in the game just while I was playing for this time, but there were only about 5 challenges a week, I think. Maybe that goes up as you rank up, but the challenges weren't varied enough, so like I would get like a little bit on each challenge, but I didn't feel like they were something that I was going to complete naturally just while playing. But also they don't update quickly enough to kind of offer smaller ones that would just be one-shots or simpler goals that you could do to see a more instant reward like the day that you're playing. Once again, I could just be misunderstanding the system, but I would personally like to see daily challenges that offer maybe slightly smaller rewards, but have tasks that are more attainable to do within 1 or 2 matches, as like a normal session that you might do if you're just living your normal life and have a little bit of time to play the game every day or so. I think that Marathon definitely would benefit from implementing these 2 things, and Bungie has such great experience with creating, team deathmatch style modes. I don't see why they wouldn't try to throw something like that in there, especially if they're already going to have a larger map that they can break into sections to help people kind of learn the map and gunfights a little bit better. And the daily challenges, I think, would create a greater incentive for people to jump in quickly, even if, they're busy or doing whatever, so that they could try to drop a few of those and get the rewards. All right, and the final thing I want to talk about is the matchmaking, the matchmaking system, the MMR system. MMR stands for your matchmaking ranking, which is how Hunt groups up lobbies. So they try to keep people within the same range of their matchmaking rank. I believe mine was like 2,000 to 2,300 or 2,300, 2,600. I'm sure it's dropping as I continue to play. And so generally Hunt is going to try to group people in the same lobby, so your team and enemy teams within that 2,000 range. And so if one team has one player who's like 2,000 to 2,300 rank, they'll put in a player that's like a 2,300 to a 2,600 rank if the overall rank of the lobby is a little bit higher, to kind of make sure the teams are evenly organized. I don't know if I was encountering cheaters or high-level players, or I'm just truly that terrible, but it did feel like there was not a great consistency to the caliber of the players I was playing with and against. Now, I don't know if that's necessary, and I can't tell if the system is working as intended because I'm such a new player, but I was reading online a lot of people have a problem with this system, and it's basically inability to rank players in a way that makes sense, and it causes a lot of failures within the system as far as putting together fun lobbies. Now, the whole skill-based matchmaking thing is a very complicated topic, and kind of one of the things that I'm taking away from playing Hunt is that I kind of want to look a little bit deeper into the entire concept, into a long-form video, specifically talking about what is the best manner to implement skill-based matchmaking, or if it should be implemented at all. I don't really have an answer for it, and I don't know how I want to see it play out in Marathon. But I think I'm going to look into it a little bit more before I draw a conclusion, with still saying that I think there's some room for improvement in terms of how we rank people together. But after I do that deep dive, I will keep you guys updated and let you know when that video is coming. Next week, I should have my part 2 for my ARG analysis of Mida out about the zine. It's very good, a lot of good information in there. And thank you to everybody who is liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you like the video, let me know, and I will see you guys next week. All right, bye.